Welcome into CBS Sports HQ. This past weekend was a very good one for Oregon and their football program. Dan Lanning's team getting a commitment from four-star safety Peyton Woodyard, a previous Alabama commit, along with Michigan State transfer defensive tackle Derek Harmon. The two moves send the Ducks up to the two spot in the 24/7 transfer portal team rankings, trailing only Ole Miss. Lanning's team have added 14 players via the portal as they get set for their maiden season in the Big Ten. So let's talk portal winners and losers with Chris Hummer from 24/7 Sports and our college football analyst Chip Patterson. Let's start with Oregon and their big weekend. On top of the 12 other players they secured in the portal, you heard about the two other men they secured Friday and Sunday. So Chris, I'll come to you first here and ask you, how much better is this team after this spring portal season?
Significantly better. Derek Harmon was one of the best overall defensive tackles in the portal. Oregon actually would have loved him to get him back in December. They hosted him for an official visit, decided to return to Michigan State, but they were able to get him a second time when he came out in the spring transfer portal window. You just don't find a lot of big bodies like him. And for the secondary, somebody like Peyton Woodyard is a really good addition for their future. Oregon wanted to add more young bodies to that group, so they have depth. They have a starting caliber defensive tackle. Like, it's hard to argue with Oregon as a winner of the portal cycle overall.
Yeah, I mean, did Dan Lanning need all of these pieces to be able to compete for a Big Ten title? It's honestly just mean. You know, I tell you what, everybody else who was in pursuit of Derek Harmon really needed Derek Harmon. You know, the impact on the roster, the impact on the defensive line would have been so much more. And I think the same can be said for the secondary, where, you know, Oregon, sure, they want to be able to be deeper there. Same with defensive line. Dan Lanning wants the ability to rotate with players, you know, because he's looking at a 16, 17 game season trying to compete for a national championship. So I'll tell you what, that's the thing about the Ducks, is they have that right approach in my eyes of still recruiting at a high level out of high school while also supplementing with high-end portal talent. And again, some of the moves I saw from Oregon this spring, it was a roster that I thought was going to be one of the 5 best going into next season in the country, and now they only added better pieces to it. So it is great for the Oregon Ducks, and also a big loss for the other schools that were in pursuit of these guys, because they needed them a lot more than the talent-loaded roster up there in Eugene.
Chris has an article about portal winners and losers over on 24/7 Sports, so let's dig into that a bit. Chris, who is your biggest winner?
Well, Chip mentioned needs. Let's go to Oklahoma, because they had some massive ones in the trenches, and Oklahoma was able to fill them. They got the best center in the portal in Branson Hickman from SMU. He was a first-team all-conference pick last year. They out-muscled TCU for him. And TCU is a school where Branson Hickman is a legacy, so Oklahoma just straight up won that battle. They had a Dominic Williams from TCU as well, who was arguably the best defensive tackle in the portal. They had to have him. They beat out Texas. They beat out Oklahoma. They beat out Missouri. They beat out LSU. They beat out all the big schools in the country looking for defensive tackles to get Dominic Williams. He was a huge upgrade. They also had a Jermaine Lowell from Louisville. He's been hurt a lot in his career, but back at Arizona State, where he was a couple of years ago, he was an all-conference level player. So Oklahoma needed depth. Oklahoma added starters. I think they've won this window.
You know, I know it's easy to just focus on the offense and just focus on quarterback and the skill positions, but what Miami continues to do, I think, really signals an all-in season. That Mario Cristobal, you know, heralded as he arrived back home, he is sub 500. He is 12-13 overall since taking over. They have not taken that step forward, and I think that this is the year when it's got to happen, and that all-in approach has been obvious with some of those ways they've tried to upgrade offensively. You know, Damian Martinez from Oregon State, clearly the big winner here. They also get Sam Brown in at wide receiver. And I was thinking, you know, it's been a while since Miami, a program that has had a long history of great running backs. 2016 is the last time that Miami has had a 1,000-yard rusher. Can Damian Martinez break that streak of 7 straight seasons with Miami not having a 1,000-yard rusher? If he does it, and if De'Aaron King can be that guy at the quarterback position, then the Hurricanes are not going to be near 500. The Hurricanes will be competing for an ACC championship.
The Miami Hurricanes have only had one double-digit win season in the past 20 seasons. That came back in 2017. All right, in terms of the spring portal losers, we can't overlook the mess at Michigan State, can we, Chris?
Michigan State definitely has had some issues this offseason. We talked about Derek Harmon earlier. That was a huge blow for Michigan State. They thought they brought him back. We haven't talked about Simeon Barrow, but he's another guy who was in the portal at defensive tackle. He was their other starter. He's a defensive tackle heading to Miami now. They also lost Jaden Mangum, who was their top returning player in the secondary at safety. They lost top 2023 recruit Vi Jobe in the portal. They even lost one of their star defensive tackle transfers in Brandon Lane from Stephen F. Austin, who decommitted last week. It's been a rough go-around in the portal for Michigan State and Jonathan Smith, and that roster is much worse for it. They are the team in the Power 5 that I think has been picked the most so far this spring.
Yeah, it's really tough when you think about Oregon State, just the way that everything seems to be working against you. Your coach, Jonathan Smith, who was a Beaver great, he leaves and he takes, Aiden Childs and a bunch of other pieces with him. And then here in this spring cycle, you lose Damian Martinez. We celebrate Miami for being able to get a running back who might be able to be that 1,000-yard back. Well, what about back in Corvallis, where they're left just picking up the pieces? You throw in the fact that the Pac-12 is all broken up everywhere else. Oregon State in a scheduling agreement with the Mountain West. It just seems as though it was bad news after bad news after bad news. Damian Martinez sticking with the Beavers in the winter cycle was like one piece that Oregon State could hold on to. We got him. He's going to stay home. And then he leaves. And he leaves for Miami, right? It's not as though we can connect Damian Martinez to some family history at Miami. It's not as though it is, regionally makes sense compared to where he was at Oregon State. No, he hit the market. He wanted one of the highest bidders or one of the best fits, and that was going to be down in South Florida. So just gut punch after gut punch for an Oregon State football fan who's seen their conference explode, their head coach leave, transfer portal exits on both sides of the ball, and now someone who you thought was going to be sticking with you hitting the road via the portal.
So the spring portal is now closed in the sense that players cannot enter, but those in the portal can still leave. So there could still be additions to teams. Granted, those are limited because you guys have gone through the top players that are off the board. But with that in mind, which teams still have question marks for you? Chip, I'll start with you on this one.
I'm going to go with LSU because one of the things I love about our relationship with 24/7 Sports is the ability to really track the visits. And if you're not signed up for a VIP, I mean, what are you even doing? Well, we get all these reports about, this coveted portal player is going to be in Baton Rouge this weekend, or LSU is in on this other coveted portal player. And time again, we're seeing those players, Dominic Williams being one of the last of them, we're seeing them commit elsewhere. And this is 2 straight portal cycles where I think that LSU, who, granted, yes, I understand that a transfer was Jaden Daniels. So I'm not saying that overall everything's fallen apart. But the last 2 portal cycles, I think that they've left a little meat on the bone in terms of really addressing their needs, because LSU was in on a lot of these players, especially along the defensive line, and they didn't get them. So it's still an incomplete grade, I think is a good way to put it.
I think another team to think about is Florida in that way. Florida should be in the winner column. Florida's had a really good offseason since the winter portal window. Florida added Jason Zandamela, who was the #1 overall interior offensive lineman in the 2024 cycle from USC. They added him to a class that already has the #1 QB in the 2024 class and the #1 defensive lineman. Florida only lost a single player in the spring transfer portal window, and it was a very, very deep and the 2 deep backup. So Florida's had a really good spring, but what it hasn't had and what it hasn't done is add an impact receiver. Florida still needs to add an impact receiver. They've missed on several of those targets thus far this offseason, and I think I've got one left on the board in Elijah Badger from Arizona State. Badger led the Sun Devils in almost every receiving category last season. He's already visited Washington. He's already visited Arizona. He's scheduled to see Florida next week. If Florida can close that recruitment, they will have an excellent offseason. They will be a winner. And if Florida can't close that, I think you could argue they're a loser. They've had this needed receiver the entire time, and they haven't been able to fill it. So for Florida, it really comes down to Elijah Badger of where they're going to fit in this article and this idea of winners and losers.
It's going to be, we'll see how the week meshes out for them. Chris Hummer from 24/7 Sports, college football analyst Chip Patterson discussing transfer portal winners and losers. You can read Chris's full breakdowns over on 247sports.com. You heard Chip talk about it. If you don't have a paid subscription to 24 Sports, I mean, what are you even doing? Wall-to-wall team coverage, recruit rankings, transfer portal updates, and great articles like the one Chris has up right now. Go to 247sports.com. And for more from Chip and the entire college football crew, be sure to check out the Cover 3 podcast. Latest episode, the crew is talking about the transfer portal, bowl season, Kirby Smart, and Oklahoma. You can download and follow the Cover 3 podcast wherever you get your podcast.